The fellowship hall of a small church in Shreveport, Louisiana, was filled with the faint hum of murmured conversations and the soft scraping of folding chairs across the polished floor. Normally a place for Bible study and Sunday potlucks, the space had taken on a more formal tone this evening. At the front of the room stood Donald Trump, his larger-than-life presence unmistakable. The familiar orange hue of his complexion and his signature hand movements were instantly recognizable, but tonight he appeared quieter, as though the gravity of the occasion had tempered his usual bravado. The crowd was a mix of families, senior citizens, and curious locals, each eager to hear what he had to share. Yet, among the attendees, one figure stood out, not because of size, but because of her quiet determination. 8-year-old Lily, dressed in her best Sunday dress, clutched a well-worn, leather-bound Bible against her chest. The cherished book, passed down from her late grandmother, had faded gold lettering and pages softened by years of use. Before arriving, her mother had whispered words of encouragement. "You can ask him, but only if you're brave and truly mean it." Lily had nodded, her heart pounding as if in agreement. For weeks, Lily had practiced her question, scribbling it in her notebook during recess and reciting it before falling asleep. It wasn't a childish inquiry, but one that weighed heavily on her young heart. As the evening unfolded, Trump spoke on familiar topics, policy highlights, past successes, and his vision for the future of the nation. The crowd responded with occasional applause, though the energy lacked the enthusiasm of his usual rallies. Meanwhile, Lily waited silently, her small hands gripping the edges of her Bible tighter with every passing moment. When the time for audience questions arrived, a line quickly formed. Adults eagerly approached the microphone, asking about local issues, national concerns, and even throwing in compliments about his iconic red tie. Lily hesitated, shrinking into her seat, but her mother's gentle nudge reminded her why she was there. Gathering her courage, Lily stood. Her legs felt unsteady as she made her way to the line, her heart racing so loudly she was certain everyone could hear it. As she inched forward, the room began to take notice. The whispers grew as people turned to see the petite figure clutching her oversized Bible. When it was finally her turn, Trump's gaze softened as he looked down at her. "And what's your question, young lady?" he asked. His voice surprisingly gentled. Lily's grip on her Bible tightened, her knuckles turning white. With a voice trembling but determined, she asked, "Mr. Trump, what does God mean to you?" The room fell utterly silent. All eyes shifted between Lily and Trump, the weight of her question pressing heavily on everyone present. For a man known for his quick responses, Trump didn't reply immediately. Instead, he studied her, then glanced at the Bible in her hands. Something in his expression changed. His usual confidence softened into a vulnerable stillness. The quiet was palpable, as though the very air was holding its breath. Trump finally raised a hand as if to steady himself and leaned slightly against the podium. "That's a big question," he began, his voice lower and steadier than usual. "And it's not one I've always had the answer to." Trump paused, his eyes meeting Lily's again. "When I was about your age," he continued, "I had a lot of questions about God, too. My parents took me to church every Sunday, and I remember sitting in those pews, staring at the stained glass windows, wondering if God was really listening to me." He paused, glancing at the audience as though gauging their reactions. His fingers tapped lightly against the podium's edge, a subtle sign of introspection. "My father used to tell me," Trump said, "that faith is like a ladder. You climb it one step at a time, and sometimes it feels like you're going to fall. But you keep climbing because there's something at the top worth reaching for." A faint chuckle rippled through the audience at his words, easing some of the tension in the room. But Lily didn't smile. Her gaze remained fixed on Trump, patiently waiting for a deeper answer. Trump leaned forward slightly, his tone softening further. "As I grew older, life threw a lot of challenges my way. Losses, failures, and moments when I wasn't sure if I could keep going," he admitted. "In those times, I didn't always feel like God was with me. Sometimes I was angry at him. Other times, I thought maybe he'd given up on me altogether." The room remained captivated. This wasn't the polished rhetoric or rehearsed lines they were accustomed to. It was raw, unguarded, and deeply personal. Trump's voice steadied as he continued, but over time, I realized something. Faith isn't about always having the answers. It's about believing that even when you can't see the full picture, there's a purpose. Something greater is at work. He turned back to Lily, whose grip on the Bible had loosened slightly. Her wide eyes shimmered under the fluorescent lights. To me, he said slowly, God is that purpose. He's the reminder that even when we fall, even when we fail, we're not done. He's the one who tells us to keep climbing, even when the ladder feels like it's about to break. As Trump's words settled in the air, Lily's eyes welled with tears. The room began to murmur softly, sensing the profound moment unfolding before them. At first, her tears were silent, just a single drop trailing down her cheek as she clutched her grandmother's Bible. But then her small shoulders began to tremble. Her mother instinctively placed a comforting hand on her back. "It's okay, sweetheart," she whispered gently. But Lily shook her head. This wasn't sadness. It was something deeper, a release of emotions she hadn't fully understood until that moment. Trump's words had touched a part of her young heart she had long kept guarded. Noticing Lily's reaction, Trump stepped away from the podium slightly, his expression softening further. "What's your name?" he asked gently. "Lily," she stammered, her voice barely above a whisper. "That's a beautiful name," Trump said with a faint smile. "You know, Lily, sometimes the simplest questions are the hardest ones to answer. And sometimes those questions remind us of what really matters." Lily nodded, her tear-filled eyes never leaving his. "My grandma used to say that too," she said softly. "She said God is always listening, even when we can't hear him." Trump's expression flickered with a mix of admiration and understanding. He took a deep breath, his attention returning to the audience. "This little girl just asked a question that most adults are too afraid to ask. What does God mean to us?" It's not an easy question because it forces us to look inward. It makes us face our fears, our doubts, and our flaws. The room was utterly silent, the weight of his words pressing down on everyone. Lily wasn't just a child with a Bible anymore. She had become a symbol of something much larger. Her courage had transformed the evening from a routine town hall into a shared moment of reflection. Trump's voice softened further as he addressed the room. "We live in a world where we're constantly searching for answers outside of ourselves. We think success, power, or money will fill the gaps inside us, but they don't. The real answers are the ones that make us uncomfortable, the ones that make us ask, what do I believe in? Who am I when no one else is watching?" He turned his gaze back to Lily, offering her a faint smile. "Thank you for reminding me of that, Lily. You're wiser than most adults I've met." A ripple of applause spread through the room, soft at first, but growing in momentum. Lily, still clutching her grandmother's Bible, didn't seem to notice. Her tears had dried, replaced by a quiet sense of pride. She wiped her cheeks with the sleeve of her dress and looked up at her mother, who smiled at her with glistening eyes. As the applause subsided, Trump's tone shifted once again, signaling that the conversation wasn't over. He straightened at the podium, his eyes scanning the crowd before returning to Lily. "There's something I've learned over the years," he began. "Faith doesn't always show up in grand moments. It's in the small ones, the times when someone offers a hand, listens when you're hurting, or asks a question as brave as Lily's. Those moments remind us of what really matters." Lily smiled faintly, her confidence growing. Her mother leaned in, whispering something in her ear that made the girl's smile widen slightly. Trump continued, his tone growing firmer. "We're living in a time when it feels like the world is pulling us apart, politics, opinions, differences. But faith has the power to bring us together. It's not about being the same. It's about understanding that we're all climbing the same ladder, one step at a time, even if our paths look different." Applause began again, this time stronger, and people rose to their feet. They weren't just clapping for Trump, but for the moment itself, the courage it took Lily to ask her question, and the raw honesty it had drawn from everyone in the room. As the applause subsided, Trump leaned forward one last time. "So tonight, I'll leave you with this," he said, his voice steady but filled with emotion. "Ask yourselves what faith means to you, And don't be afraid of the answer, even if it feels uncertain. Because faith isn't about knowing, it's about believing. He paused for a moment, letting his words sink in before adding, and if something touched your heart tonight, hold on to it. Let it grow, and share it with those who need it most. The room erupted into applause once more, this time accompanied by hugs, handshakes, and even tears. Strangers who had entered the hall with polite nods were now exchanging stories and smiles. The collective atmosphere was one of connection and shared understanding. Trump stepped away from the podium and walked toward Lily. Kneeling slightly so they were at eye level, he said, "Thank you, Lily. You've got more courage than most people twice your age. Don't ever lose that." Lily extended her small hand to shake his, her voice steady now. "Thank you, Mr. Trump, for answering." Trump stood, offering her a faint but genuine smile, and turned back to wave at the crowd as he exited. The room remained alive with conversation, the people clearly moved by what had unfolded. As the hall slowly emptied, Lily looked up at her mother, her voice soft but resolute. "Grandma would have been proud, wouldn't she?" Her mother smiled, tears welling in her eyes. "She would have been more than proud, sweetheart. She would have been amazed." The lingering message in the room was clear. Sometimes, the bravest questions lead to the most profound answers. And in those answers, we rediscover parts of ourselves we didn't even know were missing. If this story touched your heart, take a moment to reflect on your own faith and share it with someone who might need it. And don't forget to subscribe for more stories that inspire, challenge, and connect us all.